Let's get the facts straight before we dive into the wreckage. I am 34 years old. My mother was 55, and the villain of this story, my ex-stepfather, who we will call L, is 65. They had been married for nearly 17 years. For a long time, their relationship was a closed book to me. There was always questionable behavior, a certain tension in the air. But I had moved out at 18 to start my own life, so I kept my nose out of their business. It wasn't until I was 27 that I re-entered their orbit. I had decided to go back to college to better myself, and my mother and Elle both agreed to let me and my small family move into the basement apartment of their home. They co-owned the house as joint tenants. In the eyes of the law, everything they had was split 50-50. It seemed like a stable arrangement. But stability is often just a facade for the cracks forming underneath. About a year and a half into my college program, our world stopped turning. My mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. It was terrifying, but there was a plan. She was scheduled for surgery to remove the tumors. We were hopeful. But life rarely goes according to plan. A week before her scheduled surgery, one of the large tumors ruptured. It was a catastrophe. One complication led to another. The cancer metastasized, and the diagnosis changed. It was now a rare form of cancer in her connective tissue. The doctors gave her a grim timeline, 2 years, and that was without aggressive treatment. This is the moment where a husband is supposed to step up. This is where he is supposed to be the rock, the protector, the caregiver. But Elle didn't want to be a caregiver. He wanted to be a widower. We were at the doctor's appointment when the mask finally slipped off. Elle threw a full-blown tantrum right there in the medical office. I have the medical notes to prove this. The doctor wrote everything down. Elle stood up, face red with rage, and shouted that his wife would not be doing anything. He meant no treatment, no chemo, no fighting. He stormed out of the room, leaving my mother trembling in her chair. That was the day my mother looked at the doctor and confessed her deepest fear. She said, "I fear for my life. I know if I don't do the treatments, I will die. But I also know that Elle won't let me do them." That sentence should haunt anyone with a conscience, but Elle didn't have one. Once we were back home, the abuse escalated from neglect to active sabotage. He became verbally, mentally, and physically abusive. He drained their joint bank account completely, ensuring my mother couldn't even buy a loaf of bread, let alone pay for medication. But he didn't stop at financial ruin. He wanted to make sure she couldn't get to the hospital. He cut the brake lines on her car. Let that sink in. He severed the brake lines of a car driven by his cancer-stricken wife. He did everything in his power to stop her from attending her appointments. She was scheduled for treatments twice a week. Because of his interference, she only made it to maybe half of them, and that was only when I or my spouse could sneak her out and drive her ourselves. The home became a war zone. My mother moved down into my unit in the basement for her own safety. I became her shield. I confronted him one afternoon, shaking with adrenaline. I told him, "If you do not stop, I will do everything in my power to ensure you are held responsible for her death." He just laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh. He looked me up and down and said, "You are a woman, what can you possibly do to me?" That was his mistake. He thought my gender made me weak. He didn't realize it just made me underestimated. And he certainly didn't know what I was studying in college. I didn't just get mad. I got busy. I hired a lawyer for my mother, and I made a pivotal change in my own education. I switched my program to criminal law. I needed to understand the beast I was fighting. I needed to know the system inside and out so I could dismantle him piece by piece. I started building a case. This wasn't going to be a he said, she said situation. I needed hard proof. I installed security cameras throughout the home. I didn't hide them. Elle knew they were there. He was so arrogant, so convinced of his own invincibility, that he didn't care. He continued his abuse, his threats, and his tantrums, all while the little red lights on the cameras blinked, recording every single frame. It took 8 months. 8 months of collecting evidence, logging dates, and saving video files. During this time, I tried to offer him an out. I had been pre-approved by the bank to purchase his 50% share of the house. It was a fair deal. All he had to do was sign one piece of paper, and within 30 days, he would have walked away with $250,000. He refused. On camera, he sneered at me and said, "You aren't going to get this house. I am going to put your whole family on the street." He wanted it all. He didn't want a buyout. He wanted to watch us suffer. Eventually, the evidence pile was high enough. my lawyer's office handed Elle a summons to attend court. And true to his character, he refused to go. He actually told the process server that he, quote, knew more than the lawyers, and he wasn't going to show up. In the legal world, failing to show up is the fastest way to lose. Because of his arrogance and his absence, we won by default. The court granted sole possession of the home to my mother. But we didn't stop there. The judge ordered all his assets locked and placed under my mother's supervision to prevent him from liquidating anything else. He was hit with a restraining order barring him from the house and from coming near my mother. And, crucially, his passport was flagged. He was not allowed to leave Canada. That night, the police arrived to evict him. The locks were changed immediately. Watching him being escorted off the property was the first breath of fresh air we had taken in years. With him gone, we could finally focus on saving my mom. We got her onto the Ontario Disability Support Program. This opened up doors for transportation services through the Cancer Society. Finally, she could get to her treatments safely and consistently. But there was still the issue of the house ownership. This is where the specific legal nuance becomes very important, so listen closely. In Canada, when you buy a house, you usually have two options. The first is joint tenants. This is standard for married couples. It means you both own the whole house together, and if one spouse dies, the house automatically goes to the survivor. This is exactly what Elle was banking on. He was waiting for her to die, so the title would simply slide into his name. The second option is tenants in common. This means each person owns a specific percentage of the equity separately. If one person dies, their share doesn't go to the other owner. It goes to whoever is named in their will. My lawyer and my mother successfully petitioned to break the joint tenancy. They converted the ownership to tenants in common. This was the magic bullet. While my mom was still lucid and capable, she rewrote her will. She set everything up so that when she passed, her share of the house and all her personal assets would bypass Elle entirely and come directly to me. For the next 2 years, we fought to keep my mother alive. But we also kept going to court with Elle. He was relentless in his obstruction. He refused to sign divorce papers. He refused to look at settlement offers. He was stalling, purely out of spite. I became my mother's full-time caregiver. I bathed her, fed her, and held her hand through the pain. The cancer was eating her away, but her spirit remained because she knew she was safe from him. Toward the end, there was a court settlement meeting. Elle was there, along with his lawyer, my lawyer, and a judge. The mask was fully off now. Elle looked around the room and stated, on the record, I refuse to sign or deal with anything else. I will not attend any more meetings. I am going to wait for her to die, and then I will take everything. The room went silent. The judge and both lawyers told him explicitly, that is not going to happen. They tried to warn him. They tried to explain that the legal structures had changed. Elle just laughed. He walked out of that room believing he had won the waiting game. That was the last time anyone heard from him. My mother passed away this year. It wasn't the cancer itself that finally took her, but a complication. A tumor ruptured, causing a massive upper gastrointestinal bleed. It was sudden, and it was traumatic. She died in my arms. There was nothing I could do to stop the bleeding. That moment broke something inside me. I was diagnosed with PTSD from the trauma of her death. But even through the grief, even through the flashbacks and the nightmares, I knew I had one final job to do. I had to finish what she started. I had to handle the estate. Elle had vanished. He changed his contact information and failed to update the courts on his whereabouts, which was another violation of legal procedure. My mother's lawyer took her will to probate court. Because we had prepared so thoroughly, because we had the video evidence, the medical notes, and the court orders from when she was alive, the process was clear. The judge reviewed the tenants in common status. He reviewed the will. Everything was transferred to me. I signed the paperwork with tears in my eyes. It was done legally, properly, and ironclad. I became the registered owner of the house with sole physical possession. I was granted her life insurance, which I used to pay off her debts, including the joint line of credit and credit cards that Elle had racked up. Everything he thought he was getting by waiting for her to die was handed to me, stamped and approved by a judge. I also presented the court with the original medical notes, the ones detailing his outburst at the doctor's office and my mother's confession that she feared he would let her die. My lawyer and the judge were sympathetic. They agreed that his actions, the delays, the stress, the sabotage, undeniably led to her premature death. However, the law is a rigid thing. They told me they couldn't hold him criminally responsible for murder. I am not giving up on that front. I am still in court as we speak, pushing for criminal negligence charges. My lawyer gives it a 60-40 chance, which is slim, but I will take those odds. But let's talk about the house. I am not a monster. I told the courts I would honor the original agreement of the 50% buyout. Technically, Elle still owns 50% of the equity of the home, even if he has no right to step foot inside it. However, the math has changed significantly. Since I am the sole owner in possession, I am doing renovations. The house needs work. And since he is a 50% equity holder, he is responsible for 50% of the costs. I am also deducting the debt he owes me. I paid off the joint mortgage. I paid off the joint line of credit. He owes me for half of all of that. As it stands, he owes me over $50,000, and that number climbs every single day. My lawyer is also petitioning for him to pay 50% of all my legal fees and 50% of my lost wages due to my PTSD diagnosis, arguing that his abuse caused the trauma. But to collect that money, or to pay him his shrinking share, we needed to find him. Since he went silent, the statute of limitations on his claim to the house began to tick down. In my province, you have 2 years to pursue a claim. He opened a claim to get the house back, but then he vanished. The court threw it out. The official ruling was abandon claim and title. I showed up to court. He did not. So where is Elle? My friend did some internet digging and found the answer. Elle has fled to Mexico. This is significant because it proves he violated the court order preventing him from leaving Canada. He is now a fugitive in the eyes of the civil court. My lawyer and the judge have advised me on how this ends. If he stays in Mexico, or if he dies there, we will petition his estate. His 50% equity will be transferred to me as collateral for the massive debt he owes me. If he tries to come back to Canada, he faces immediate repercussions for fleeing the jurisdiction. And if he tries to reopen his claim on the house, he can't. It has been marked as abandoned. He cannot sue for the house again. He is stuck. He has 2 bad options. Take a settlement offer that is being eaten alive by debt deductions, or take nothing. In either scenario, he will never step foot in this house again. He will never sleep in the master bedroom. He will never sit on the porch. He effectively made himself homeless by trying to steal a home from a dying woman. He looked at my mother, a woman he swore to love and cherish, and decided her life was worth less than a piece of property. He cut her brake lines. He screamed at her doctors. He starved her of resources. All because he was greedy. All because he thought he was smarter than us. He told me, "You're a woman, what can you do?" Well, Elle, I can take everything. I can take the house, I can take the assets, I can take your reputation. And I can ensure that you spend your golden years looking over your shoulder in a foreign country, knowing that if you ever return, I will be waiting with a stack of legal bills and a smile. The courts agreed with me, the lawyers agreed with me, and in the end, the universe agreed with me. He waited for death to make him rich. Instead, it left him with nothing. That is the reality of the legal system. It moves slow, but when it hits like a freight train. This woman didn't just get revenge, she secured a legacy. She honored her mother by destroying the man who tried to erase her. What do you think? Did Elle get off too easy by escaping to Mexico, or is living in exile a fitting punishment for what he did? And have you ever seen a waiting game backfire this spectacularly? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of absolute judicial destruction, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We have plenty more stories of payback coming your way. Until next time, remember, be careful who you step on, because they might just know the law better than you.